Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the first meeting of Prosperous Overview and Scrutiny 2023. Happy New Year to you all. I hope you had a good Christmas and New Year. Doesn't look like you've ate your weight in chocolate, all of you, so that's good. So we'll get straight on. This is the meeting we should have had on the 16th of December, which has been postponed till today. So the first item, apologies. Jonathan?
Have apologies, Chairman, from David Smith and Reverend Metcalfe.
Okay. And just let's start the new year as we mean to carry on. All mobile phones switch to silent or off, please. Declarations of interest. Does any member have any declarations on today's agenda? No? Okay. Item 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 10th of November. Do we agree those as a true record? Have a proposer and a seconder. Thank you. Okay, and straight on to item 4, which is the Staffordshire Sustainability Board Communication Plan. Now we've got Rose Hampton that's on Teams. Welcome, Rose.
Hello, hi.
Okay, over to you. You've got a cold, so I'm glad you've stayed there.
Yes, exactly. I can't see the presentation, Jonathan. I'm not sure if I should be able to on this screen. If not, I can just talk to my plans.
Yeah. Oh, can we get the presentation?
Just a minute, Rose. I'll just try and find it.
Oh, thank you.
Do you want to start talking, Rose, and I'll try and find the presentation?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. To be
Okay.
honest, the presentation is just visual aids anyway, to give you an idea, but I will crack on. So, first of all, did you know that Staffordshire emits 5.8 million tonnes of carbon a year? Now, I don't know if any of you watch David Attenborough, but that's about the same weight as 30,000 adult blue whales, which is the biggest animal on Earth. The public sector contributes around 2% of these carbon emissions, which is the equivalent to about 600 whales. So it's still quite a sizable amount. As a local authority, we're in a really unique position to be able to set an example to reduce our carbon emissions and to influence others to do the same. I'm Rose Hampton. I'm a Senior Communications Officer here at Staffordshire County Council, and I've spent the last year and a half working in the climate change sphere. I've been running communications campaigns that have mainly focused on getting people to change their behaviours to be greener, more sustainable, and help to make the county a better place to live. Over the last 3 months, I've been working with my colleagues in the district and borough communications team, and we've come up with a plan of how we can work together to increase understanding of climate change and to change people's behaviours. We've developed a joint comms plan, which you will have all seen now, and it's part of the work that the Staffordshire Sustainability Board is doing. And I'm just going to run past the plans with you today. So the first thing that we all agreed on doing was that we plotted some key dates out into the calendar for 2023. We thought we would have a look at key dates that we could hook some sustainability messages onto. There were about 25 key environmental days in the calendar. So what we did is we just cherry picked a few that we thought would have the biggest impact and have the widest reach. We also looked at finding some of the holidays that most people celebrate, like Valentine's Day, Easter, and Christmas, that we could also weave sort of climate change messages into. It was mentioned at the Staffordshire Sustainability Board when we ran the plan past them that they would like to add a few more multicultural holidays into the calendar. So the ones that you see in the plan, there will be one other holiday added in there, but we just haven't decided which one that will be yet. We're going to do a little bit more research and choose based on Staffordshire's demographics. Um, the second thing that we're going to be doing is, I don't know if any of you saw the big carbon bubble that was inflated in Stafford town centre in April last year. So one of our objectives was to increase Staffordshire residents' understanding of climate change and carbon literacy. And last year on Earth Day, we just trialled this big carbon bubble in Stafford town centre, and it was a 10 by 10 metre bubble. It was absolutely huge. And it said on the front of it, "This is what 1 tonne of carbon looks like." The event got loads of really good engagement, and it even made regional headlines in the news. So we plan to run a carbon bubble roadshow throughout the summer of 2023. We're going to be taking the bubble to each district and borough, and we're going to be running engagement sessions at the events. We'll be talking to residents on the day about climate change, educating them on what they can do at home. We're also going to be asking people to make a pledge to be greener, and we're going to be having big signs there that people can stick their pledges onto, and then the pledges will then be displayed within local libraries. The third thing that we're hoping to do, again, throughout the summer, this is a sort of final part of the puzzle. We plan to run a formal a consultation with our residents to actually find out what they think about climate change and what they think their role is in actually combating it and contributing to making Staffordshire greener. At the moment, there is no baseline information that's out there about individual responsibility, and there's nothing that's Staffordshire specific. So we really thought that asking residents these key questions about climate change would help us to get a really strong baseline of information, and also help us to plan our campaigns and activity for the coming years. The final part is around funding. So already each district and borough council has agreed to contribute £3,000 to this year's activity, and alongside a £25,000 contribution from the county council. Now that funding has already been found within the district and boroughs using an underspend of an officer role that wasn't recruited for some time. So they used the extra money to fund this for this year. It's going to be used to deliver the Carbon Bubble Roadshow, the consultation activity, and the social media activity around the calendar. When it comes to evaluation and what kind of impact we're having, we want to make sure that what we're doing is going to have an impact. So we will meet monthly to discuss the plans, and the work, and then we will do a quarterly report back to the Staffordshire Sustainability Board, mainly looking at key statistics such as the website clicks, media coverage, any social media engagement, those sorts of things. So finally, we all know that teamwork makes the dream work, and campaigns are always stronger when more people get involved and promote the messages. So working in this really joined up way will help to ensure that all of our messages are amplified, going out at the same time, reaching as far as possible, and just having a big impact. So that's everything from me. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Thanks, Rose. Members, any questions? Councillor Hookfield.
Thank you, Rose. Thank you, Chair. In section 14, it talks about legal implications and the Climate Change Act, and it talks about gases, not carbon dioxide. What do we do about methane, which is a lot worse than carbon dioxide in terms of breaking down the ozone layer? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Unfortunately, I'm not a climate change expert. I'm a communications expert. That is something that I can feed back to the professionals that are sort of the climate change experts and ask them around some suggestions of activity that we could do to reduce that. So I'm sorry that's not the most clear response for you and not giving you an answer right away, but it's something I can report back if that's okay.
Clive, did you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. The communication plan is all about carbon reduction, so that's its sort of major focus. Obviously, methane is an issue as well, and I don't possess to be an expert on that. But a lot of the work that has been done over the last sort of couple of decades has reduced that issue with the ozone layer. So the comms plan, the major focus on that is the carbon reduction and the aspiration to be net carbon zero by 2050. So it's sort of very much a focus on that. Hope that helps.
Thanks, Clive.
Philippa.
Could I ask the communications with regards to the consultation, how that's going to be delivered out? How are we going to get the information from the residents?
So it will be a formal consultation. We will be using the Staffordshire County Council's consultation portal, which is already sort of set up and ready to go. We will be encouraging people to fill out a questionnaire, which will have sort of net promoter scores on it, some free text boxes, and more information that they can input. The questions that we are planning to ask haven't yet been agreed, but we will be working on those over the next few months before the consultation starts. And it will just be a joined up approach to how we get people to engage. So there'll be press releases, social media directing people to complete the survey. We'll probably use the parish councils and the local councillors as well to help promote the messages, as well as all of the other channels that we have, such as email marketing and the district and borough sort of local magazines that they do. Really, there's lots of ways that we can get to people and target them to encourage them to complete the survey.
Any further questions from members? Rose, can I just ask, we're being asked to note the progress today. What progress has been made so far, as it was only set up quite recently?
So we have our first meeting of the year this week. So we will be planning our first campaign, which is taking place for Valentine's Day. So that will be sort of taking place in the next week, ready to go for the week of Valentine's Day. But until we meet this Friday, there has been no progress since the papers have gone through.
Any further questions or comments from members? No? Okay, so we've got two recommendations this afternoon to note the progress of the Staffordshire Sustainability Board in developing a unified 2023 programme of activity, to tackle climate change and work towards our net zero targets, and B, review and make comments on the draft Staffordshire Sustainability Board Joint Communications Plan, which sets out our 12-month programme of climate change awareness, raising and behaviour change activity. And I think if we think of anything after today's meeting, those can be added that don't feel that you can't add it just because you haven't said it today. So if there are no further comments or questions, we'll note those recommendations. All in agreement? Thank you. Thank you, Rose, for coming in on Teams today. I hope you get better soon.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Okay, we'll move swiftly on to item 5, electric vehicle charging infrastructure strategy. That's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? Over to you, David Williams.
Thank you, Chairman. Happy New Year to you and the rest of the members. Can I just say that this strategy has been developed to identify local need and availability and suitability of public sites, and demonstrates this administration's commitment to helping reduce carbon emissions and adding to our climate action plans for 2050. As you know, the change to EVs is being driven by government, who are stopping fossil fuel vehicle production by 2040 and are encouraging climate-friendly vehicles by the use of public transport, climate-friendly vehicles, as well as active travel, walking and cycling. The now annual Tesla Christmas charging queues recently shown in the press have highlighted the current national public charging point infrastructure need, and has driven them to look to provide a national network provision, hopefully enabling a more joined-up localised resource requirement. As such, local authorities are being encouraged to develop localised EV charging infrastructure plans and strategies to enable them to apply for funding to support districts and borough authorities in the procurement of a local EV charging scheme to address the local need for public EV charging infrastructure through private providers. It is correct that a good percentage of people currently purchasing EV vehicles have off-road charging provision at home, but there is a need to encourage those who do not have the off-road charging ability to look for a more environmentally sustainable mode of transport, together with the need for charging when travelling, which has been publicly highlighted, as well as the developing issues with current EV travel distance limits. Therefore, a national infrastructure is needed. Funding from DFT is already available to employ staff to support this plan with these local authorities and monitor the works being implemented through private providers. I'll hand over to Clive and Richard, who will be able to take you through our EV plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. My name is Richard Ray, Head of Transport Operations and Future Connectivity. I'd just like to run through a brief presentation regarding the development of the strategy, hopefully very informative. But the strategy, it's just before I talk about the strategy, just take a step back and discuss the agenda. So a few items that I'd like to discuss with you today. Just touch on the role of the local authority, the strategy development, the strategy itself. Why do we need a strategy? Which is quite timely following Rose's presentation. The current picture, what the state of play is in Staffordshire, our aspirations, where do we like to get to and how, before concluding. One more, there we go, apologies. So, up until last year, there was a national strategy released by the DFT. The role really of the local authority is quite uncertain. Lots of local authorities raise questions asking what their role should be, where would the funding become available to recruit the knowledge, expertise, the capacity of people to deliver such a strategy. But the 2022 national strategy really set out there's an obligation there for local authorities to develop and implement strategies. The government realise and feel that local authorities are best placed. They know their residents, the businesses, the visitors they want to attract, and they can help shape and develop a network of charging infrastructure that meets the needs. Staffordshire County Council strategy aligns with the vision, the aims of the national strategy. I've copied and pasted the vision and aims from the national strategy there. The Staffordshire County Council strategy looks at and makes points in regards to accessibility, reliability of charge points, how we'll work with the private sector, how we will look at off-street charging options and look at price. So lots of similarities between the two documents. But the strategy itself has taken a couple of years to come to fruition. So this work, in line with the 2019 climate change emergency, the authority declared work commenced and then stuck because of COVID, like many things did. We reinvigorated that work in 2021. We're working alongside Amy Consulting. We developed meetings with board councils, districts, understanding their requirements, their aims, desires. We had workshops, and this led to last year. Towards the end of last year, we developed a strategy, but also we have an executive summary, toolkits. We've got a lot of information, frequently asked questions, information to go live on websites. We've got action plans for districts and boroughs. And just before Christmas, we did recruit to an EV infrastructure delivery manager position. Unfortunately, wasn't able to attend today, but he's now begun those meetings with districts and boroughs to develop those relationships further. Looking ahead, which Councillor Williams has discussed previously, 2023 there will be what we anticipate £450 million Levi funding fund for us to put bids into. Later this month we'll be attending a conference in Bristol where the criteria should be set out, so we'll have a clear understanding of what we can bid for, what will be asked. We'll take that away, again working with districts and boroughs, collectively work together to see what we can collectively go and bid for. Within that 450 million was a £50 million funding stream for staff and resources to develop the strategies. We've already recruited that position already, and we've developed that prior to the allocation being given. But the strategy itself, it's 70 pages long. It's quite detailed. A number of our local authorities do have quite considerable sized documents, but I think we've topped it. But within that document, it is split down into quite significant sections. There's policy, there's procurement mechanisms, there's all the different details in relation to the charging options available. It will be required for a flexible charging network. This is all information that, following meetings with district and boroughs, they wanted it to be included. It's a document which is kind of a one-stop document really, that we'll update. It will need updating. Technology innovation is changing all the time, so we'll keep an eye on that and update the document. It needs to ensure that it's linked to the local transport plan, so again there might be some developments needed there. But really the primary aim of that strategy is to provide a framework really to assist, to enable an accessible network of public charge points across the county to be developed really, to support decision-making processes across the board. But why the need? Well, there's significant climate implications. Transport contributes to 40% of the 5.8 million tonnes of carbon emissions in Staffordshire. So if we can facilitate that move towards EV, there's significant impacts there. There's health implications for the air quality. But there's government policy as well. So alongside the national strategy, we're aware that there's new vehicle restrictions, petrol and diesel restriction, new car restrictions from 2030, hybrids from 2035. The government has set out an aim of at least 300,000 charge points across the UK by 2030. So yeah, there's a significant work to be there if the government and ourselves are going to reach that target. So with that target in mind of 300,000 charge points in the UK, this is figures from the DFT in November, so the latest that was available at the time. The UK was shown at 34,500, so if we want to get to 300,000, rounding down slightly, we're currently at 10%. So in Staffordshire we're at 300, if we're at 10% then we're looking towards 3,000 charge points across Staffordshire before 2030. We currently have a high number of rapid charge points, high percentage, and charge points per 100,000 population is a bit lower than the West Mids and UK average. However, we've got the strategy hopefully in place soon. We've got an EV delivery manager, so working with the private sector, that figure will increase in due course. This is it's a bit hard to see, but it's a bit of a infographic really of the charge points in Staffordshire at this moment in time. A low number of slow charge points. These are probably one of the first ones to be installed. Slow charge points, by the very name, take a long time for a vehicle to charge. Ideal for home charging, but on the public network, it's more the fast and the rapid that we'd be looking to implement in the future going forward. And the numbers of them, by the circles on the maps showcase there, that's where we're heading towards, what we're looking to implement. Probably about a third of the strategy document is the analysis that we've undertaken with AIM Consulting. So we've incorporated a lot of data, whether that be demographic assessments, age, household incomes, access to cars, looking at their journey frequencies, commuting, social, school travel, journey purposes, where people like to visit. So that could be destination charge points and things like that. And then combine that with the infrastructure assessment. So what is the WPD capacity, who owns the land, the car parks, planning applications. So all this data is all incorporated, and we've identified the propensity of EV adoption. So this is Cannock Chase district. So each district has got the maps, looking at propensity, and this data will be provided to all the districts. So this just gives an insight of where the EV adopters could be living and what locations and the type of infrastructure that could be implemented in those locations. So the different colour blobs, so to speak, on the map, just identify what the charge infrastructure could be, whether that be EV forecourts, could it be car parks. And it's really then, so it's a broad location, but it's for the districts and boroughs to take away, to drill down, to identify exactly where the options could be. And this really just looks at our hierarchy. So we know in Staffordshire there's approximately 92,000 households that don't have a driveway. So if you've got a driveway and you're an EV user, you can charge at home, charge every night. You haven't really got too many problems. You can plan your journeys ahead and charge en route. If you don't have a driveway, then really we're looking to, say, work with districts and boroughs in the private sector to facilitate and enable a charging network to provide options for these EV users, both those that have got an EV now, but those looking to adopt in the future. So there's that network for them. So the strategy, in a nutshell, really just sets out why we need to act, explains the current position of the Staffordshire County Council, that it's a facilitator and enabler, and really how we play to assist enable the private sector to work with us to develop a charging network for now and for the future. That's really, it's got to be fit for purpose, both for now and in the future, and say technology and innovation will change, and we need to change with that and make sure it's a viable option for the future. Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much for that, and it was a good presentation report. David, did you want to come in first before we go to questions?
So just to remind members as well that this is not the County Council delivering the EV, the actual stuff on the ground. This is a supporting districts and boroughs doing it in their areas, which is why it's more localised. They highlight and identify the areas that they feel it's appropriate to have these EV charging in, and then they will be able to work with us, but they will be the ones doing the provision. We are literally more of an overwatch on this and helping provide the strategy to make sure that that will get fed into the national picture as well as with all the districts and boroughs and the liaison between the two. But we are literally not, we are not the ones delivering this. This will be the districts and boroughs to deliver with the private sector. That is going to be the big one.
Councillor Hutton.
Thank you, Chair. I fully understand that we're just having an oversight and doing strategy, but do we link into planning for future bills to try and influence where appropriate that, say for example, a new car park which is going up in Newcastle, I believe the ground floors are all going to be EV points. Are we influencing other such bills and trying to make sure we've got EV points in those public places? Because a lot, with 96,000 properties not having driveways, if we want to encourage electric vehicles, then we're going to need a lot more charging points. Thank you.
David, Clive.
Yeah, I'll know to Clive in a second, but I think that was one of the good reasons why it actually goes to districts and boroughs. They're the planning authorities, so they'll be the ones to actually be able to put it into their areas. Clive?
Yeah, just to mention that this has been raised at the Sustainability Board, Staffordshire Sustainability Board, which obviously all the district boroughs are also part of that board. So they've been cited on the strategy, and that sort of link to planning has been mentioned. The car parks, which are in Staffordshire mainly in district borough control, so absolutely, you know, it is being joined up.
And I think moving forward as well, when we come to planning developments, builders will have to put the three-phase electrics, they're ready to connect a charger when they build the houses. Otherwise, we're going to still have 96,000 properties without any driveways. So I think going forward, I think there will be some changes in planning regulations locally for those that sit on planning. Any further questions? Because I've got loads, I'm waiting to go last. No? Okay, I'll fire away. So obviously in the presentation, I've lost my bit of paper now. No, okay, I've lost what I wanted to say. So going forward, we're working with local authorities. What do you see as the challenges for local authorities working with us for the infrastructure and where we're going to put the EV charging points, firstly?
For most of it at the moment, sorry Clive, for most of it at the moment, districts and boroughs have already been doing that planning. I know for say Staffordshire, we've gone down to the fact that they've even spoken to parish councils about where they would want them in their parishes. Not everywhere is parished, obviously, so districts and boroughs have been already looking at where they would be useful, where they would be appropriate, and the types of charger, as has been explained already, there are different types of chargers, and somewhere you're shopping, the slow chargers are absolutely no use whatsoever, and if it's where people can park and overnight, then that's completely different. But a lot of this, if I was going to say there's any issues, it's one, it's going to be what funding we will get available to us to do it. Two will be the procurement process for who is going to do the provision, or how many and where, and then it will be the agreements of the districts and boroughs for organising that provision.
think Councillor Williams covered most of it there. I think for me, there are examples of local transport authorities who are a little bit ahead of us. Not many, but a few have come unstuck, and certainly on their procurement. So I think that's something that's, for me, something that's got to be looked at carefully to make sure they've got the right model when we come to procure this. So great that we can get some government funding. Clearly, we need to maximise that. But we're working with the district boroughs and obviously with the private providers, we get the best that we can for Staffordshire. There's probably every month we get approached by somebody who's going to come and solve it all, and it's going to be marvellous. So we've just got to make sure that when we do go to procure, we've got the right model.
And the reason I asked those questions is because I was on a Teams call with a lady from Oxfordshire County Council who've just been very successful in their EV infrastructure. And she said the biggest challenge they had was working with the DNOs, not wanting to do the surveys as to where the electricity already was, and planning out where they could put them. So Coventry, for example, have put them on lampposts. So they've got the lamppost and the EV charger is next to it for off-street parking. The houses are up there, and then the EV chargers are down at roadside. But Oxfordshire have had a lot of pushback from residents as well when they tried to do EV charging hubs. So they'd pick an area of waste ground, for example, and they built it. They tarmacked it all and put all the EV chargers in. Tesla came along and put all theirs in. And then all of a sudden, the residents were like, well, hang on a minute. That could have been car parking for everybody, but you've made it into an EV hub for a very low percentage of the population that are driving EV charging points. Now, just before Christmas, there was the report on, I'll use Central News because that's what I watch, about the queues on the M6 for the Tesla charging points. Bank holidays, we've been up to the one at Rugby, just off the M6, and queued to charge when we've come back from somewhere. So there is a real issue on queues already for those that have got EV vehicles on bank holidays and high days. I'm not sure about the rest of the time. I think one of the motorway services was the one on the M5 where the big farm shop is. Can't think of it now. Can't think what it's Gloucester services. They've only got 4 charging points there, but they've got this massive service station that everyone wants to go to because it's Teletubby land and can't charge your EV car. So let me just check. Has anyone else got any questions while I'm reading my notes? Philippa?
Can I just ask, are we working in connection with National Grid with regards to the improvement of the infrastructure of the electricity in the areas as well? Because I know in Hawks Green and Norton Keynes and Burntwood that they've upgraded their network, but I didn't know if that was relevant to other areas as well, because they're aware that they need to have that supply capacity for people having electric vehicles at home.
We will be, yeah. What we're doing now is we're combining all the requests and information calls for EV charge points, and then we're mapping all these requests so we have a understanding of where these requests are. We then link in National Grid, the DNOs, understanding what the infrastructure is, and we can pass that information on. We're getting a lot of these requests through. The infrastructure as it is not suitable. Can we work and then develop that network in the future? So the demand is there, but currently we can't supply, so how can we work together more closely?
Thanks, Sam. The other thing I was going to ask is, you mentioned about fast and rapid chargers. They're great. They take 30 minutes to charge your car, whereas the slow ones, where we call them the destination chargers, are great for bringing people into the town, because people will put the car on charge and then come into the town, probably buy a coffee, probably go do a bit of shopping, and then when they come back 3 hours later, the car's charged. So whilst I agree with the fast and rapid chargers, when they're only taking 30 minutes to charge, then you've got an EV vehicle then sat on that charge point that nobody else can use because they've gone shopping for 3 hours and haven't come back to their vehicle. If you drive a Tesla, you get an app on your phone that tells you when your car's charged, so you know when to go back to it and move it. But not everyone's got that. And also with the fast and the rapid chargers, there's currently, with the 22 kilowatt and the 50 kilowatt and higher, there's only the Audi e-tron and the Tesla Y and one other, which I can't remember what it is, that can actually charge on that. Because if I put my car onto a 50 kilowatt charger, it won't charge because my car will only pull 7 kilowatts at a time. So putting it onto a fast charger actually just wrecks my battery. So we do need to think about, yes, fast and rapid chargers are great, but the destination chargers, the 7 kilowatt ones, are for, I'll use a stupid example. Mum's dropped the kids off at school. She comes into Stafford. She parks her car. She puts it on charge. She goes and does a bit of shopping. 2 hours later, she comes back. Car's charged. I don't know whether you've got any views on that, David.
Yeah, I have actually. There's a lot of difficulties with EV charging, as you've just said. It's the times taken. There were reports of people being fined for leaving vehicles on when they've been charged and other people can't get on. It's not an easy. The infrastructure itself isn't available everywhere, and we're already hearing about national potential blackouts for different areas. So there's a lot of work got to go on about getting the. First of all, it's got to be sustainable electricity, otherwise it's absolutely no point. Secondly, where it is, which is why we've got it down to the district, borough and parish local areas for them to identify not only the areas but what type of charges that will be suitable. So if it's on car parks like you were suggesting, you might have a mix. You already have to have a mix anyway when it comes to Tesla because they decided not to have the same charging fittings as everybody else. And we've also, as you say, you've got some vehicles that are able to charge at different powers, but at the moment the technology is moving along so quickly on a lot of vehicles when it comes to EV charging and the distance they're able to do. Obviously they quote certain distances, but that's with nobody in the car. When you start putting 3 or 4 people in and the shopping, then it reduces that distance quite considerably. So that's where what we're trying to work with, and that's what this person who will be coordinating from our point of view will be looking at and making sure that when the districts and boroughs put their plans in place and talk to providers when we're going out for procurement, they will be able to make sure that it's the right type of charger in the right place and also with the right tariff. That's something that we are very keen to ensure for as an administration, that we are not just allowing anybody to come in with the highest tariffs. Yes, it will be more expensive than doing it at home, but obviously they're providing the equipment and maintaining it, and that will all be at their cost. Therefore, whatever they make off the charges themselves will have to provide both the maintenance and their profits. So, but we also don't want to allow anybody just to come in and give us the highest tariff. We're trying to get the best deal that will, when it comes to procurement, that will maintain the equipment and provide a reasonable rate for the people who use them.
The other thing is will we be advising local authorities to work with disability charities as well? Because Motability, for example, a lot of their vehicles are now becoming EV vehicles. And if you've ever seen somebody in a wheelchair try and plug a vehicle into an EV charger, once you've parked your car, there's no space at the front for you to get round to plug it in or to the side. So say, for example, the charging hub at Rugby, they've put their charging points right at one end of the car park, and the actual entrance into the services is probably a good quarter of a mile walk. So if you're disabled or in a wheelchair and you've put your car on EV charging, and then you've got to get to the front of the services to go to the toilets, for example, it's not ideal. So when we actually sat down with the manager of Rugby Services and said, why have you done the EV all the way up there and there's none with like disabled spaces at the front? And they basically said, if we put them at the front, every man and his dog will park in them and they won't care because we can't police it. And it's the same as disabled spaces, it's the same with mother and baby spaces, you just can't police it all of the time. But I do think it's a consideration that local authorities need to look at. Like if you've got your car charged at the front, so you're going forwards, you plug it in, but if you're disabled, you've got no way of getting a wheelchair around to actually get to the plug itself. So that's something else. It's all about space and it's about availability for everybody, for including those that have got disabilities.
I completely agree. I think anybody who's putting them in needs to consider that, and I would definitely suggest that the person that we've got who's coordinating that will be bringing that on, highlighting it wherever the procurement ones that we're putting in. As you know, that on private property at the moment where they put them in is completely up to them. And actually there's quite a lot of infrastructure going in. They're on pub car parks. I think all the Shell garages are putting them in throughout Staffordshire at the moment. I think a lot of the other garages are following suit. And you would expect them to be looking at that. But as I said, from the part that we're going to be looking at, where we'll be working with the districts and boroughs and the parishes, we would hope that they would look at that. I know in Penkridge, for example, there's a private company who are going to work with the parish council to provide 2, and they're putting them right by the side of the Hailing Dean in disabled bays. So they're actually making all the bays disabled so that people can use those as well. So I think, you know, it does come down to a bit of common sense with that type of thing. But when it comes to the ones that are private, provided by external companies that are nothing to do with the procurement that we're going to be doing, then I would hope they would look at what they're doing. But that will be up to them. For the ones that we're doing, yes, we'll be making sure that that will be spoken and considered.
And I've only got a few more things as well. The other thing is when you deploy one unit, when you've got one unit with 2 sockets, so one either side, that might only be a 7 kilowatt charger. But if you plug 2 chargers in, the wattage, the volts drop, so you don't charge at 7 kilowatts. So that's another consideration for local authorities. If you're going to deploy a unit with 2 plugs, make sure that you can pull the 7 kilowatts per vehicle or 22 kilowatts, because otherwise you'll be there all day trying to charge your vehicle. And then one last thing, more county council wide, we have lease vehicles within the county. What are we doing to make those greener, and obviously car sharing and making it more environmental friendly for people to travel together rather than 62 councillors, for example, all travelling on their own?
Well, as members should be aware from the cover page that was on the interwebs before Christmas, that all staff have been offered the opportunity to look at, I think it's a lease type system with EV charging, EV cars, and it might, or high cars, obviously. We're currently looking at our fleet and how we're going to move forward with changing the fleet over, which will include putting EV chargers in our depots. I've actually been speaking to Renault over the Christmas period about HGVs, who are apparently are one of the leaders at the moment in EV HGVs. So I'm speaking with those, and I'm going to be looking forward to having further discussions about what HGVs are going to be available that are EV. But obviously we've got to do that, as well as the fact that we're going to be needing to look forward with the other style of vehicles that are coming up, because we've still got the hydrogen vehicles that are going to be coming forward. At the moment, the hydrogen vehicles that are for HGVs change hydrogen into electricity to make it move, rather than the bullet. The bullet ones are the ones where they will be much more efficient and a lot longer distance. So that technology again is going forward very quickly. But we are looking at making sure that our fleet is there. We have got an opportunity for staff to be able to have EV vehicles with leases. And you know, if we looked at the amount that if we took all of the carbon vehicles off the road, that's over nearly 2.5 million tonnes of carbon. It's never got, you know, it's going to be quite a while before all of those vehicles are off, but we are moving up and moving forward. Part of the issues obviously are the cost implications of the electric vehicles themselves at the moment, but that is changing. So there's a lot moving on, there's a lot going to be changing, there's a lot going to be developed as this season, but I think we have done what we can at the moment for staff and for ensuring that we're looking at our fleet for the future.
Thank you. I'll let Graham come in now.
Thank you. On HGVs, my understanding is that battery-powered HGVs are too heavy. and they can't sustain any load. The Tesla HGV has just basically come to a stop because they can't carry any weight. It's all battery. And Renaults are made by Volvo.
They are made by Volvo, and as I said, their technology is moving forward. In fact, they've got fleets now of Renault HGVs. I'm aware that DPD are buying them as well. So I don't know who they're buying them off. It might be Volvo. I'm not sure. But there are HGVs out there that are with the technology that's going forward that is reducing the weight of the battery, so it's not just battery weight. But also remember that every time we put these lovely big vehicles on there, including cars, they're a lot heavier than normal, and therefore they're ripping my roads to pieces. So just to put that into perspective.
If we just add that in terms of our own fleet, we've got HGVs. We are looking at the use of HVO fuel as an alternative. So the Gritters, I believe, we're actually starting to use that, and the waste fleet that we're using with the household waste recycling, which is BIFA, they're all going to be converted to HVO. So it's all part of that carbon reduction agenda. So, but yes, certainly this strategy is principally focused on private cars.
Thank you. And one for you more so, David. If a resident wants to put an EV charger outside their house, so on the highway, we've got the potential of trailing cables, rubber matting. Will that require planning or highways not getting involved? I think when I asked Clive this, I think that it was going to be more planning than highways.
I think you'll find that actually within the plan, we are not going to be allowing people to trail wires across the path to their vehicles. It is a trip hazard and they will be liable. So they will be notified of that. If we find it, they will be informed about that and asked to remove them. But there's been quite a few trials actually throughout the country, where, as you said, with regards to lampposts and people doing these things. They've even had types of guttering that they've used. It doesn't last, it costs a lot of money, and it also causes quite a lot of issues because then people think they've got the right to park on the road without a traffic regulation order. They haven't. So anybody could park there and stop them being able to do it. So there's lots of caveats to that, but we would not be allowing for people to be trailing wires across paths at all. That is mentioned within the strategy.
And then the last one was when we're looking at putting EV chargers onto the highway, which we're going to have to in the future. Will it affect the footpath, footway, whatever you want to call it, widths? This is going to be a challenge, obviously, because some of our footpaths are wider than others. So you can get away with it in certain areas, but then there are some that are very narrow.
You're quite right. There's also some that go up and down. So the ones we trialled in the Homecroft area were ones that, when they're not in use, actually went down into the ground so that they stop anybody vandalising it, so forth. All I can say is that will be down to when the planning goes on to make sure that there is sufficient access for people to continue on the path. And if the path is not wide enough, then there won't be a charging point put in there, quite simply. We're not going to be blocking our highway to allow that. And at the same time, it depends on which provider comes forward with the right procurement offer to us to be able to go forward with that. But we won't be blocking highways for that.
Okay. And the last thing, I promise you, it's also on a lot of the reports as what it's not in ours, but there has to be a 2.5 metre separation from all electrics. So you'll notice that lampposts are 2.5 metres apart. So you can't put an EV charger in the middle of two lampposts. So that's something else that local authorities will have to consider, is that there has to be a 2.5 metre gap. Coventry didn't do that very well and got stung. And all of a sudden we've got EV chargers that are setting fire.
I think when you look around the national picture and the international picture actually for EV, there's lots of different places people have got EV chargers. It's the case where that's why we're doing a strategy with the districts and boroughs and the parishes to ensure that where they go is the right places, and we won't be allowing that within the wrong place. So that was the whole point of the strategy, going down to those people at a local level to make sure it's a locally delivered to where they want it and how it should be so sustainable.
Thank you. Well, as you'll have heard, EV charging is a bit of a passion of mine. If nobody's got any further comments or questions, then we have one recommendation, which is unlike David, that we consider and provide comments on the draft Staffordshire County Council Public Electric Vehicle Charging Infrastructure Strategy in advance of a recommendation to County Council Cabinet. I think we've done that. Well, I certainly have. I'm sorry about the rest of you. So if we're happy with that, are we happy with that recommendation? Thank you. Well, thank you, David and team, for the report. And we will move swiftly on to the Highways Transformation Q3 Progress Update. Oh, it's Councillor Williams again.
Thank you. So, without ringing a bell, as he's still poorly, we've kept him over there. I'm going to hand over to James about our highways transformation. He's got a presentation to show you on this. All I can say is that from our point of view, especially from Darryl and myself, and for James, it's very exciting where we're coming to now. The actual changes that are going to come forward, the way we are going to deliver the contract management and the difference in that, so that we have the overview and the way that we can hold Amy to account as we continue with those on an annual basis is going to be really, really positive. And as you know, finances are difficult, but we're hoping to continue to fix more roads as we have done this year, improve transport and improve our digital connection. So without taking over from it, I'll hand over to James.
Thank you, David, and good afternoon, everyone. I'll just say in advance, I'm sorry I do sound quite hoarse and so on. I've been recovering from a cold. I'm over the cold now. I think this is just the remnants of the coughing on my throat, but don't have any great fears about that. So really pleased to be able to bring this latest update Highways Transformation Programme back to the Select Committee and share with you some of the highlights that have been progressing since the future delivery model and the additional in-year investment were approved by Cabinet last July. It is, as you know, a large and complex programme. There's many different moving parts to it, but we'll try. Sorry, I'm already a slide behind. But we'll try to. Well, what we'll do is I'll go through it in the three main parts of the programme, which is set out there as an update on the progress of the future delivery model. Some of the changes we're making now around transforming our current offer sort of live, if you like, in advance of that new delivery model taking place, and the progress around the extra investment strategy. Excuse me. So that's it. At the heart of the transformation programme, you remember, is this new hybrid mixed economy delivery model. Building on the previous feedback from Select Committee and Cabinet subsequent approval last July, over the summer months we've been spending a lot of time working about how that new high-level operating model will how it will function, if you like. So using that to inform how the individual functions will be commissioned in future, how the performance of each one of those different functions will be managed and monitored, and then how a change in delivery model of any of those functions will be activated if it's not performing adequately. We've also been using this model to design the contract changes that are needed with Amy to enable a sort of transformation into the new way of working, which will be the quickest, least disruptive and most affordable way to move to this model. And then secondly, also to redesign our organisation structure to be able to operate this model. So on the first of those two things, the contract changes have progressed exceptionally well. We've been able to focus very much on the existing strategic partnerships agreement that focuses upon being able to do the right things in the right way. And with that, we've really been able to focus the conversations on these changes are about adding more rigour and governance to annual service plans, tightening up performance management arrangements and setting a clear expectation and mechanism that a delivery model has to be fit for purpose. And if any model isn't functioning and achieving what it's set out to achieve, if that element isn't performing, then it will need to change. In exchange, obviously, for less surety that Amy have about providing those functions, they do also, though, have the benefit of the new functional model being able to showcase their performance, so that actually if in the future they can demonstrate really high, strong performance in each of those functional areas, then that gives them great credibility to be able to potentially secure more work from the County Council for other activities, or also from the borough and district councils, who also have access to the existing waste partnership arrangement. But also, probably more significant, even bigger opportunity for Amy is if they utilise this model as it's intended, they should be able to demonstrate that best practice for bidding for other local authority contracts across the country, of which there are lots coming to market in the next couple of years. And reflecting on the pressures of inflation, Cabinet's agreed the only thing really we needed to change within the contract was to introduce an indexation point, really to maintain sort of status quo in light of current inflation, and that's just an indexation around the way the fee points are currently set. Because obviously they were originally set back in 2012, so their values have changed significantly as a consequence of inflation over recent years. Both Amy's board and the Cabinet have given their approval in principle to the proposed contract changes, the new model, the deed of variation that sits with that, and the commercials that underpin it, and we're currently drafting that. We're actually expecting the agreed deed of variations returned today, actually, but it might be a couple more days, but we're hoping to finalise that by the end of this month. In terms of the organisation design to operate the new model, we commissioned the support of the LGA to help us design this work. We used a set of design criteria, which I've put on the slide there. I won't read out to you. I'm sure you can read them for yourselves, which were agreed with the strategic board that overseen the transformation programme, including Councillor Williams, Councillor DeVille and Councillor Philip White, to support the transformation programme. So we use those to essentially a new organisational structure that will bring alive the new vision, driving particularly around that customer improvements, quality and value for money assurance. So on the back of that, we're moving towards a organisation structure which will be functionally accountable, but also where individuals for those individual functions are locally aligned into what we'd call like sort of virtual team presence, providing functional consistency through county-wide policies and procedures that have been through a political sign-off process, but adapted to meet local priorities based upon local knowledge and enabled through local relationships. So following informal Cabinet's approval of the contract extension and that proposed organisation structure to support it, the next stage is really now to start to implement those changes, which is where the transformation programme will really start to come alive for the staff and the workforce that are involved. So we'll be moving away now from this point onwards from the sort of simple cascading of communication and messages to staff and workforce, and really start to now positively engage them more directly in delivering the changes that are necessary to deliver the transformation vision. And some of that work, as you can see from the photograph there, has already started with things like engaging staff in a review of our current ICT systems, identifying barriers to being able to deliver the new vision and ways to operate and work better together and achieve the new vision. So moving on to the next part of the programme, so transforming our offer now. Oh, sorry, there's a delay with the button. The second part of the programme is around transforming the current offer, so in advance of the new delivery model taking place. This has really been a huge amount of effort been going on in parallel with the future delivery model to transfer, if you remember, some of the earlier TUPE transferred functions. So we transferred asset management, safety inspections, claims management functions back to the council on the 1st of April of this year. Can't overstate how complex it's been to sort of be involved in unpicking what those working arrangements were, putting new interim arrangements in place whilst we design the future as well. So I do just want to give a call out for that to the teams that have been involved in that, because it's been a huge undertaking, and hopefully most of us haven't really noticed that. It just goes on seamlessly in the background. Other activity that's progressing in parallel is engaging with the digital and customer service teams around starting to redesign the future customer pathways that sort of fills that gap that's left behind, you know, since we lost the telephone contact centre. We moved to a digital platform, but we've got this gap in the middle, so redesigning solutions to solve that. Also designing what we mean by community focus, and that's can't even speak, sorry. Still can't say it. Most importantly, about supporting members in their roles as local champions to be able to solve local issues at speed. And then also starting to plan out what a possible future Staffordshire Innovation Hub could look like, bringing together sort of local academia, local businesses to test and upscale new solutions that are going to solve our problems in Staffordshire. And sort of just to say a little bit more on innovation, because it is an important point. I've just got this slide here. It also gives us an opportunity there to just put a picture of David up on the screen. So there's the group of pictures on the left-hand side is really just giving some examples of some sort of short-term activity. So it's testing new techniques that are currently available on the market now, partly as business as usual activity, also partly of some of the things that's been enabled through the extra investment that's available in year, which we'll come back to and say a little bit more about the progress of that in a minute. Some of the examples that I've just illustrated, and they're only a handful of examples, there's lots of others. But for example, we've got, you know, trials of various proprietary delivery solutions, such as the JCB Pothole Pro that's in the middle there. There's the thermal patching technique, which we've got at the bottom of the screen, and the multi-hog street scene equipment on the left-hand side. We've also got at the top there things like the gaze to video surveying techniques, which provide sort of more customer-friendly digital inventory and condition data that will help inform our future capital investment programs that not only solve the sort of asset need, but also are much more in tune with what customer and public perception is of our priorities. And I've also put a symbol on there to identify some of the digital capability on the top left there, about, for example, using air quality sensors to dynamically alter traffic light sequencing to improve things like air quality. So, excuse me. So loads of kind of business innovation going on of existing techniques. To the top right-hand side there, we've got an example that just represents an early move in development of this new Staffordshire Highways Innovation Hub that I talk about. So in January, we'll be co-hosting an event, a national event at the NMA with a company called Carbon Tech, which is basically bringing together local authorities and stakeholders to develop new solutions to more efficient and effective management of green infrastructure, which is a growing pressure within the highway sector, particularly around things like tree management, and the increase of things like ash dieback, which is prevalent elsewhere across the country and starting to find its way into Staffordshire. And then at the bottom right hand is a longer term aspiration to sort of wanting to raise the profile of Staffordshire to showcase Staffordshire taking a more prominent role as a national sector leadership in innovation programmes, particularly around things like digitisation and automation of the local road network. In much the same way of how do we sweat that local road asset, in much the same way as you see a sort of on the motorways and smart motorways using live traffic data and information to manage the network itself. How do we embed that within the local road network, but also use that as more the Internet of Things to achieve many other opportunities, similar to some of the stuff we've already heard about this morning around EV capability and the like. And then the last part of the transformation programme is the investment update. Obviously, last but not least, very important part of the programme. So this is split into capital and revenue investments. On the whole, the capital investments progressing really well. Certainly on the structural maintenance schemes, one scheme now, the A51, A518 junction at Weston, is complete, and as of today we've now got 6 of the remaining 7 sites are all on site, with the last remaining sites due to start in the middle of February. Other elements of the programme, such as the Repairing Places pilots, have evolved into a range of activity that involves piloting some new techniques and some of the innovations I just referred to before that are on the market. There's also been some challenges in identifying sort of suitable sites and coordinating all the activities, but overall this programme remains on course. It will be delivered within the financial year in terms of outcomes on the ground, but then the subsequent cost-benefit analysis of that work about what that would look like to roll out county-wide if we were to go forward will come forward in sort of Q1 of the new financial year. The customer service work stream has also made a lot of progress. I've called it amber there though, just because whilst a lot of the activity has been going on in terms of actual expenditure, in terms of a new customer service solution, that's unlikely to happen in this current financial year. It'll be carried forward into the next financial year. So I have just called it amber there to highlight that. The following slides are in your pack. I wasn't intending to talk through these in detail because it is just detailed appendices really. They're quite wordy slides, but they just give a flavour for each one of those components I've just talked about, to just give some background to justify why it's green, amber or red status. That slide in particular is a little bit out of date now, could be updated. And that's the customer service one I've just referred to. So you can see a lot of activity that's ongoing, but actual spend will be amber status. And then the final slide really is on the revenue spend. So the revenue investment has been more challenging. Back in July when the funding was committed or confirmed, we did say then that we were hoping to spend around £1 to £1.5 million on additional interim capacity to support the transformation programme, with residual funding about between £0.5 and £1 million being earmarked for some other priority service pressures, such as additional grass cuts at the start of the season, or being able to continue with the gully emptying pilot that was so successful last year. So we said that right from the start. But like elsewhere, especially in the public sector, we've really sort of struggled with some of the recruitment. It's been a huge challenge. And although we've had some success in recruiting, and we've also persuaded a few colleagues to sort of delay retirement plans and so on to support the transformation programme, it does still mean that, as we are at the minute, we're only projecting to spend around about 550,000 of the 2 million on actual interim additional capacity this year. So that's really hard for the teams involved, because it just means they're having to work harder and flat out to maintain the programme, its current momentum, and keep moving things forward. But on the positive side, what it also means is that there is also further residual funding that's available, which informal cabinet just before Christmas, we did hope to come here first before we went to informal cabinet to test this, but obviously timing that didn't quite allow that. But just before Christmas, informal cabinet agreed to use that residual funding to continue to progress some other locally important service pressures, the details of which are summarised on that slide there. But the specific on the ground detail is currently being worked up with input from the community highway teams and their local knowledge of local priorities and members' priorities. And that, I think, is that's it. So for Q4, really, that's just a summary of what our next priorities are. So as we move into that, we'll be finalising the legalities of the contract extension arrangements for the future delivery model. Also, obviously, making sure we deliver on those the extra investment around the capital and revenue that I've just talked about, and then the programme will be focusing upon designing those several new ways of working that will be used to help engage staff, frontline workforce in the transformation programme, and also help to start to see that real change on the ground for staff involved and from members as well. And that is the final slide. Thank you.
Thanks, James. I'm going to start on this one. I think the biggest thing for me is obviously the Amy contract. I'm going to try and put this politely. We have got some work to do to convince our residents, general public, that Amy are the best people to do this to carry out this work on our behalf. So I think the question for me is, what are we going to do? How are we going to convince our residents that this is the right decision? And I don't know which one of you wants to come in on that, but I think we're probably all wanting to ask that question because we've all seen very, the not so good work, the not right first time work. So I think we've got to go back to our residents and convince them on the county's behalf that this is the right way forward.
So I'll start with that. So when it comes to Amy, the change in the contract means that each facet of what they provide to us will be able to be scrutinised on an annual basis. And within that, they can get a yellow card, and then we can actually stop that facet and go out to procurement. It's not the easiest thing to do, what people might think of procurement for services like Amy's. And in fact, when it comes to the contract itself, it wasn't until I went through the contract and looked at what they were providing there's a bit of misinformation out there in the fact that they were doing a lot of work, they were doing a lot of good work. A lot of it was in the fact that the work was in where they prioritised themselves rather than us, which is the big change that we've made, so that members and community highways teams will be working with Scrutiny, the schedulers, to make sure that it actually gets done when it should do, where we want it, rather than where it's the most efficient, because that, unfortunately, when you're looking at it from a most efficient point of view, it's a lot easier to shut a lane and do it rather than shutting a main road, but actually it's the main road. A lot of the roads are looking at that. The innovation part has been part of the new contract itself, so they have to put so much money onto that. They will also be doing extra community days, so that means that we'll have other works that can be carried out on a local basis. So the difference, I feel, will be the fact that, one, we've got annual scrutiny of each individual facet that can be reported on and properly scrutinised, looked at and changed. The holding to account by the fact that we've brought in and tupied over the staff now for the inspectors and the safety staff has really been started to prove fruitious. And we have done things in the past. Shobnall Road is a perfect example where we've tried a different type of approach with a different surface and it hasn't worked. So we're doing it again, you know, and that's not at our cost. That's going to be at the cost of something else. So I think what we're looking at is the fact that we've changed the way we're working with Amy now. We're going to be changing the way we're working in the future. And actually, the difference I hope, and this will be down to individual members really to start working with their community teams as well, will be to say this is my priority early on, not waiting until June, July time expecting things to get done, because when you're looking at programming things in with finances, with road schedules, with road safety and making sure we've got traffic management, we need to get it in as soon as possible. And unfortunately, some members will put something in September, October and expect it to be done for Christmas. It's just not going to happen. So I think, you know, there's a bit of work there with members, but also that thing of the fact that we have done some communications. We've got a dedicated comms officer now for highways as well, who will be promoting what we actually do achieve. We usually only see what we don't get done. And actually, it's down to local members who aren't getting out there often enough to say, look what they've done here. There's a different area. There's a crossing going in, I know, in just around Cannock area, and I'm hoping that the local members will be out there taking some lovely photos and making sure they're really happy about what's going in. And it is a case where we've got to actually do some of the promotion when we get things right. Where things are getting wrong, then that's when we work with our community, as members, we work with the whole community highways teams. But I honestly think the way we've changed this contract means that we've got a lot more control, got a lot more scrutiny, a lot more power in a lot of ways, in the fact that they've got each facet for annual review, and it has to be up to a certain standard, and that'll be the standard set by the engineers, because they know what they're talking about as engineers. You know, when you're looking at roads, we look at the surface of a road and we look at it, has it got density, and they look at a lot different. So I think it's a case of making sure that what we do is done right in the right places through local members and through community highways teams.
Thanks, David. Graham?
Thank you. I don't have much problem with the strategy, and I don't have much problem with where you're managing Amy. I think it's the right approach to move to active management of the contract. I do have an issue with how we manage utilities. As you know, I sit on the Severn Trent Staffordshire Highways Committee. Let me tell you a little bit about the A34. There's the M6 and the A34 are the only two major roads that run south to north through Staffordshire. And since beginning of very early December, the A34 at the Park House roundabout, north of Newcastle, has had bollards on. It's taken me ages to find out who put the bollards up. Hey, it's Staffordshire County Council. And they've put it up for health and safety reasons, because there's a major leak that Severn Trent have got to fix. Now, I've been on to Severn Trent today because our managers don't know what's going on. So I've been on to Severn Trent and they said, oh, we're waiting for E.ON to switch a lamppost off because we can't work while that lamppost is on. For obviously they don't want to get electrocuted. So I've written to E.ON today. I've copied you in, James. I've written to E.ON to say, when are you going to switch this lamppost off? Because, you know, to have a major highway with no work going on for 6 weeks is just not acceptable. And can I just say something about how we handle things? I know you can go away and say, hey, we've got to get better at managing utilities. But if we had 2 giant signs, one on either side of that roundabout, saying, Staffordshire County Council have put these bollards in for health and safety reasons while we wait for Severn Trent and other utilities to get their arse into gear, that would have been absolutely brilliant because everybody says, what's going on? That's what really, really, and my post bag's full from people saying, what's going on? It's just not good enough. When we're putting bollards out like that, and it's not, and we're doing it for health and safety reasons, for motorists, we should be then saying we should have a couple of they don't cost a lot of money to put signs up, get a couple of big signs up saying, this is Severn Trent's problem, they're not doing anything about it. And I bet you Severn Trent will come along and we'll send a photograph of that to Severn Trent's chief exec, and I bet that'll be fixed in no time at all. Because E.ON, but I shouldn't be doing this. I shouldn't be having to contact all the utilities to try and get something sorted out on our major highway. Because we don't run the M6, but we do run the A34. And it's just absolutely bonkers. And all I can say is I'm getting a lot of flack from people. And the queues, I mean, it can take you 20 minutes to get through that junction now. I'm surprised FedEx hasn't sent us a bill. Anyway, that's it. But I think we can do things better. Signage, and let's start trying to manage utilities saying, well, what's your problem, Severn Trent? Oh, it's E.ON. Write to E.ON saying, why haven't you done this? And that way, we'd have happy customers. At the moment, we don't. Sorry. But for so long, this has been going on for so long that I can't believe that our staff, our local staff, haven't raised this as a major issue with you guys. Because they should have done. Amy, whatever her name is, should have flagged this up. This is a community highways matter, and they should be managing it, not me. Anyway, enough of that. Thank you.
Councillor Hutton, whilst I've let that slide, just remember that we're here for the whole of Staffordshire, not just for your area, and also please mind your language.
But it's just an example that we're all, if we just put
Okay.
signs up explaining
Okay,
to people.
I'm with you, but just remember we're here for the whole of Staffordshire. Darryl.
I won't go into that specific item, but the point's well made. But one of the whole reasons last year we cheaply transferred the services around network management and traffic management back into Staffordshire County Council was to get a grip of that. And exactly as James has talked through the presentation, and you've given us feedback on previous iterations, this whole transformation is about getting grip and control of what matters within the delivery of highways to Staffordshire County Council, so that whoever your strategic partner is, be it an Amy or a Ringway Jacobs or whoever it might be in the future, I mean, it doesn't matter because you've got the grip, control and oversight you need, and that's the most fundamental aspect of that. Without it, it doesn't matter who your partner is. So that's exactly what we're doing, is bringing all that control. So the example you gave, it sounds like there's some issues we need to pick up around the community team as well, not picking things up. But in terms of that grip and control of utilities, that is exactly why we've transferred services back in line with your ambition as the kind of elected members for Staffordshire County Council. So you'll see those improvements really start to rocket over the next 12 months in 2023.
Philippa?
Thank you. With regards to the trials that have been carried out with regards to the Roadmaster and the thermal road repair, what quality controls are in place for them now that I can see that they've been delivered over 8 sites with regards to the roadmaster?
So when it comes to the quality control, actually, all of our sites have the lab that we've got in Stafford, and we've carried out testing on several sites of what it is, how long it lasts, and they're looking at it from a scientific point of view. So they take core samples of how it works and how it lasts. So that's what they're looking at the moment. And we are trialling at the moment the winter not thermal patch, the winter roadmaster, the one with the hairdryer on the front, as we call it. But that one's trialling at the moment. That one's going around different places. And it's the first time we've done that over the winter, because normally people tell us we shouldn't be doing it. That's why it has to dry it out first. So there has been a lot of testing going on. The one when it came to the thermal patch that took place in Billbrook, I know that the lab was there because I was there with them, and they were taking core samples at the time. So we've also doing exactly the same when we looked at the JCB Pothole Pro up on, is it Jail Road? Jail Road. So they've actually got some sites there where they've done core testing as well. So we've been looking at it from a very scientific depth and longevity point of view.
Any further questions or comments on the highways transformation and where we are? Everybody happy? Thanks, James. I think we're all happy as to where we are and where we're going. Obviously, any further comments, get in touch with David or James or the team. Darryl as well. David first. Just to give the officers a chance. Okay, well, thank you very much. There isn't any recommendations. Obviously, it's an oral report and it's an ongoing, moving report, so we're going to be updating that as we go through. Thank you very much. We'll move swiftly on, she says, to the request for scrutiny review on civil parking enforcement. I'm not sure who we've got, so... Hello, you'll have to introduce yourself because it doesn't tell me who you are. Hi, Lee. Welcome
Lee
to
Barnard, Traffic and Network Manager for the south of the county.
Okay, so
here
over
representing,
to you.
Yeah, here on behalf of David Walters, who passes his apologies on. Oh, thank you. So I think you've been all privy to this slide pack before, but I'll just touch upon, obviously, from the civil parking enforcement perspective, we're looking at the strategic role of parking for the whole of the county council. So as you're aware, parking is part of all our lives. It affects where we go and how we choose to get there. In terms of on-street parking provision, it's got an important role in delivering the county council's vision, providing opportunities to support thriving economies, enhancing the quality of life for people living in our town centres and improving conditions for pedestrians and other road users. And primarily as well, easing traffic flow and improving short-term accessibility of town centres. Parking spaces, as you're aware, are needed to help our local economies grow. But conversely, if we provide too many parking spaces, it can also encourage car use when more sustainable and environmentally friendly forms of transport could be considered more appropriately. So civil parking enforcement is the name given to the transfer of some powers from the police to local authorities. It was first decriminalised in 2008 and subsequently includes powers provided to the local authorities through the Traffic Management Act of 2004. Primarily our powers are to enforce where parking restrictions exist, with obstructions and moving traffic offences still sitting with the police at this present time. The current arrangements are from April 2015. Stoke City Council have helped deliver in partnership with the Staffordshire County Council our back office and our on-street enforcement. This was an arrangement that changed prior to April 2015, where the boroughs and districts helped deliver on behalf of the County Council. In late 2019, we then agreed to extend the existing arrangement with Stoke City Council for a further 5 years from 2020 to 2025. We've also agreed as well in terms of a parking strategy in 2019 that was agreed at Cabinet. So I believe considerations for scrutiny will be, should there be a defined impact on the ground, with the committee making recommendations that will make a tangible difference to the work of the authority. Prioritisation is necessary to ensure the scrutiny function concentrates on delivering work that is of genuine value and relevance to the work of the wider authority. Executive should not try to exercise control over the work of the scrutiny committee, and all members and officers should consider the role of the committee plays that of a critical friend. Moving on to obviously the informal guidance was the matter of particular concern to local residents and the matter of identified priority for the County Council. So our potential areas of focus, what we've considered moving forward, is to, for consideration, review current parking strategies for the Staffordshire and any recommendations how this could be improved, including joining up across on and off-street parking, which is currently delivered by the borough and district councils. Scrutiny of views on how the approach to parking across Staffordshire could be improved to support both our climate change ambitions and growth in our economy. Identify best practice from elsewhere that could be applied to Staffordshire. Assess the performance of the current on-street parking enforcement operator and make any necessary recommendations for improvement. Assess the extent of national policy issues on Staffordshire, make any necessary recommendations for change. And that's, for example, moving traffic offences that may, powers that may be coming in, it's coming in across the country by application by the local highway authorities, and whether pavement parking does become permitted to be enforced by the local authorities outside of London. So I think really the question is, where would the committee like us to go from this for the civil parking enforcement?
Thanks, Lee. Member questions? Derek? Not Derek. Councillor Hookfield.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Who decides what patrol strategies that we have within the county and where our enforcement officers are targeting areas? So I'm talking as the whole counties, but who decides where they go and when? Because I actually had a request from the local police in Uttoxeter last week for help with parking, and I don't know who decides when and where. And then I've got one more question after that, please.
Currently, we're obviously with the arrangement that we've had in since 2015, it's flexible. We do have obviously a finite resource of civil parking civil enforcement officers at the moment. Typically, Stoke have a kind of a standardised routes that they take, primarily the town centres, school hotspots that obviously we're aware of. But we do have that flexibility to be, I wouldn't say reactive, but proactive in terms of we get requests from local members, residents, schools, etc. We can then flex our resource as required and do some targeted observations and enforcement where required. So the routes aren't set in stone, but there are typical routes in terms of a presence in town centres on regular basis. Typically every day there will be a CEO in the town centres across the county.
So when the power's transferred to our enforcement officers over parking, does that mean that the police don't deal with parking at all? Because I wasn't aware that in their fixed penalty books that those offences had been removed, because I think a lot of the time our officers don't work 24/7 like the police, and there are often times when the police really should deal with it. They're trying to kid me that they only get involved in parking offences if there's an obstruction. Now, I'm an ex-police officer. I know I've been retired 10 years, but I mean, when I used to patrol the streets of Uttoxeter, we dealt with parking offences. But now they're trying to tell me that only our officers deal with that, and I don't think that's entirely correct. And I've just got one more point after.
As you say, the police do have the powers to enforce if they wish. I'm not too sure whether those powers are on everyone's on their warrant cards. I'm not too sure. Typically, we, as I've said before, Pavement parking where there are no double yellow lines or single yellow line restrictions that cover those pavements, that will be a police issue. Obstruction of drop curbs typically can be done by both authorities. We can do it with requests by residents for enforcing their drop curb of a driveway. The police do have the powers though, with zigzags as well on pedestrian crossings. They can do it as a fixed penalty notice and issue with 3 points and a fine, whereas we can enforce, but it would be obviously by way of a penalty charge notice by a CEO. So the police do have the powers. I think, unfortunately, it's the demand and the resource now.
And lastly, I did flag this up about 18 months ago, I think, at a full county council meeting when I asked, when are we going to apply for these additional powers for moving traffic offences? Most of the issues I have in my area, and probably other councillors in other areas within Staffordshire, we could do with these additional powers to deal with things. I mean, David's quite well aware of the High Street Utoxeter issue. I'm sorry it's local, but I'm sure there are other issues. So I think really, I know that at the moment we're saying no, we're not. But I think, you know, the Scrutiny Committee need to keep an eye on this, and we need to apply for these powers. There's a lot of councils up and down the country have applied for these and using ANPR cameras and enforcement to stop people using roads that they shouldn't do. And it's very important to think now that we go forward and deal with this. It is a police matter, but as you're saying, you know, they have to look at their strategies and what officers they've got available. So at the moment, the public don't get the service from whoever that they deserve. So I think we need to look into that.
If I can, Chair, that was exactly the reason why I asked yourself about having a working party to look at what we've got with parking enforcement and what we're doing with this, and to form a working party to look at what we do, what we would like to do, and how we will get to there. So that is exactly what we're asking you to look at. It is a case where we're hoping you work with the team to identify the areas that you know where we are, what we would want, how we would do that, and then come back to Cabinet with recommendations. So it is a case really, it's a bit more of an over to you now. It's rather than us telling you and whatever, it's what you would want to do and how you want it to work. I think I'm right with that. So yeah, and obviously due to the fact the way it's worded, we don't have the input on that. I could tell you what I think, but that's not what it's for. It's for you to tell me what you think. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, David. I think we briefly discussed this at the November meeting, and I think the first thing we need to do is have that working group. So if any member on this committee is interested in being part of that working group, then let myself and Jonathan know, and Peter, sorry. And then I think once we have that working group with yourselves and Lee, then we can look at where we want to go, what comes out of that working group, and what we want from a county council and member input going forward. Because at the moment, I might want something else that Darryl wants and you want and any other member. So I think we have to thrash that out first, get members' views before we can decide where we want to go with it. I mean, an inquiry day was mentioned there. Flipping heck, dare we try and do an inquiry day? David.
And because it works with district and boroughs and residents, it will be an idea to get those sort of views in as well. From what you get, I mean, obviously, from my position, I just get told that it doesn't seem to work. So that's why we've done this. This is why I've asked for this to be looked at, to say, well, okay, if you don't think it works, what is working, what isn't working, and what can we do better? And that we're just trying to make sure we can be as efficient as possible with what we have.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing for me is, where are these civil parking enforcement officers based? Because I'm down in Tamworth, which is the other end of the county. So if they're all based up in Stoke-on-Trent, by the time they get down to Tamworth, half the day's gone. And, you know, I think, I don't know where they're based, which is why I'm asking the question. So I think those of us that are down the other end of the county to Stoke-on-Trent are not probably getting the best of the service. So perhaps that's one question you can answer for us today, Lee.
Yeah, well, the service is split kind of north, west and south east based. So there are officers deployed from Stoke. They cover Stafford, Newcastle, Stone, kind of the Utoxeter element, and Moorlands. And then we've got Lichfield. They used to be based in Burntwood, but they moved last year into the Lichfield city centre, and they cover the south of the county, so South Staffordshire area, Lichfield, Tamworth, etc.
Oh, right, okay.
So they manage consistently they're individually by 2 teams, but they kind of are always consistent in terms of the approach of enforcement and the resource as well. So there isn't, as you say, there is an element of deploying where it takes a little bit of lag to get to certain areas, but geographically there isn't all coming from Stoke.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you. There's a couple of things that affects everybody in Staffordshire, and that is, and I don't know how you would look and try to stop this, and that is parking on footpaths. I mean, today what you have is people who are delivering items to houses. The first thing they do when they come into my village is they just drive onto the footpath. And maybe that's because of the width of the road or whatever, I don't know. But it's like that now across the whole of the county. And something has to be done about it because we do get complaints about it. And the other one is schools, the parking outside schools. I mean, that is a complaint I think every school gives to us councillors. What we're going to do about these people bringing children to school and staying outside schools, even though there's double yellow lines. And of course, we don't have enforcement people who are at every school. What could be done for these 2 items that I've just brought up that could, shall we say, satisfy the people of Staffordshire?
In answer to your first question, in terms of pavement parking, which I touched on earlier, at the moment we don't have the powers that only local authorities within the city, within the London Borough have those powers, unless there's double yellows or single yellows that cover to the back of footway. I think unfortunately, it's the, as you touched upon, it's the resource with the police. If we got pavement parking powers to enforce, again, it would be a consideration of the different kind of demographic and different geographies of the county as well. You know, comparing, some terrace streets where, for example, Newcastle and Burton, where people park half on, half off, but to do the right thing, because obviously otherwise they cause an obstruction. It's kind of one size and fits all, unfortunately, for the county. So it's trying to get that balance. And if we were to get those powers, it's kind of how we would kind of enforce and in what tolerance or acceptance would be allowed. In terms of school parking, again, it's that resource element. It's we are as proactive as we can be. We do know hotspots in certain schools that are, regularly cause issues. With the CEOs, as you know, they turn up, everyone behaves themselves within reason, and unfortunately, when the CEOs aren't there, the next week, it kind of goes back to the previous behaviour. And it may be consideration. We've done some trials in East Staffordshire for the local member for the camera car, and it may be consideration that we look at rolling out more often, having it as a dedicated resource for some schools, if it's viable and it consumes its own smoke as such. That might be an option. Other local authorities have used fixed cameras to enforce their parking restrictions. Again, that might be a consideration. Whether you rotate the cameras around once they've been successful and there's a decent level of compliance, so that might be an option. Again, it's probably something to take for the working group of looking at what's viable and what might be an option.
Thanks, Lee. My only other question is how do we get in touch with civil enforcement officers? Because we get told, oh, you can't get in touch with them there. But we need to be proactive. We need to be proactive when it happens. And then if you've got to go onto this Clear Streets email, and then you've got to go through your community safety officer or whoever that is, and emails don't always get read on the day that they get sent. So if we had a way of contacting you guys where we've got an issue now, how quickly can you deal with it? because at the moment none of us can contact civil enforcement officers. There isn't a central place where we can go, all right, well, we'll send Lee that. We'll just send him an email and he can send it to whoever. None of us have that information.
Well, the Clear Streets inbox was monitored all the time. It is being kind of decommissioned now, but we have put a divert onto our trafficking network inbox. So it's traffickingnetwork at staffordshire.gov.uk, and the whole team basically have access to that. So it is a kind of a pretty reactive. It's within a few minutes. It's monitored throughout the day. Obviously not out of hours as such.
Just tell me that again. Sorry.
So it's traffic and so A&D rather than ampersand network at staffordshire.gov.uk.
Okay.
And that will reach myself and Hayley's team, and we will send it on to the relevant area teams for enforcement, and if any feedback is required in terms of whether we can enforce, whether the enforcement was successful, and whether we issued any PCNs or etc., we can easily give that information back as well.
Okay, thanks, Lee.
Without putting any words into your mouth either, Chair, it might be something that the Scrutiny Committee wants to put as one of their recommendations.
Yeah.
You know, very much realistically, you know, we want to know what you think is currently there.
I'm getting there, David. Philippa?
Just quickly, the little people that appear outside of the schools, is that something that's done through your team or is that done through the police?
Done through the schools team, so they work with I think in collaboration with the road safety team and the schools, so it's basically Catherine Stevenson's team who lead on it, and we often do it in partnership where they put the little, is it parking buddies I think they might be called, so they put out, they're put out, and then we do kind of a CEO enforcement period as well to try and reinforce that message and reinforce the buddies. So we work closely with Catherine's team to try and get almost a kind of, rather than a siloed effect, we try and get a 2 or 3 pronged attack of do the school crossing patrol information as well. We feed in with those teams as well in terms of if there's parking issues, we can help support those as well.
And just on that, some schools have actually bought their own, so it is a case where they work quite well.
It's also something we can fund ourselves out of our DHPs, if it's viable. If there are no further questions or comments, then can I have a show of hands for getting a working committee together, a working group together, and for those that are interested to contact myself and Jonathan? So are we all in agreement that's where we want to go? Okay, we're in agreement with that, so we'll do that then. So we'll work up a date when Jonathan's had time to look at the calendar and when officers are free.
Just thought, Chairman, the inquiry day is a good method of hearing evidence where there's more than one party. Obviously, it's up to you, but do you want me to arrange or try and find a date for an inquiry day? We can bring in the police and the current operator, Stoke, and hopefully it might give you a better steer on where you want the working group to focus on, because there's potentially a lot of work here.
Yeah.
It's up to you though,
and it'd be good to have the police and the enforcement team in the room at the same time, because one blames the other and vice versa. So what do we feel, guys? Do we feel that we need an inquiry day and then focus on what comes out of that? Yes? Okay, yeah, we'll do that then. Okay. So we'll look for a date in the calendar then for that. Thank you very much for your time today, Lee, and the lady that's come with you. Thank you, guys, for your time as well. You're free to go now, James. Go and get some throat lozenges, as I'm going to have to do in a minute. We've just got the work programme to do now, so... Jonathan, have you got the work programme to hand?
It's just the usual report, Chairman. I've highlighted the changes in green. The biggest thing to report, I think, is the additional meeting I've slotted in, hopefully for March 22nd.
I'm just trying to get to the
your approval.
Right page. So we've got the date of the next meeting, which obviously is the next agenda item, is the 3rd of February at 10 o'clock in the morning. Yes, I like morning meetings rather than afternoon. So we've got the HS2 6-monthly update, we've got the Staffordshire History Centre, and that's it, because we've already done the rest. And then there's another meeting that's been slotted in for Wednesday, the 22nd of March, because we've still got stuff on the programme. That'll be the Highways Transformation Progress and Performance again, the Staffordshire Community Learning Services Annual Self-Assessment Report, tree plant, oh no, that's April. So just the 2 items again for March. So if you can all note the dates and times of those meetings.
10 o'clock for the 22nd.
No, that's a 2 o'clock meeting. Could we not get a 10 o'clock, Jonathan? No. Unfortunately, it's going to be 2 o'clock, guys. They're already be in your calendar. Okay, so that's the work programme going forward, and then we've got April. And then who knows what will happen after that. So I think that brings us to the end of the meeting. I've already told you the date of the next meeting, Friday the 3rd of February at 10 o'clock. Item 10 is exclusion of the public. We haven't got anything to exclude, and we haven't got any public here. So if you're all happy, we'll close the meeting at 3:47, and thank you very much for your attendance today.